So, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're very happy to be here. First of all, many thanks to the Architecture Foundation and Alice Woodman to invite us here this evening to give a little insight into our new periodical Superposition and the first issue, Hardcore Home. We also want to thank our generous founding supporters, Caruso Sinchen and Bolzhaus Architekten, and also the CCA in Montreal, who provided us with a great set of unseen plans. Last but not least, we want to thank Wayne Daly of Daily Line, who does a tremendous job in bringing everything in reality. We, Superposition, we are a team of 4 architects, which is Dominic, Tibor, and me. And then there's also Max, who is an artist and photographer. And then there's Wayne, our graphic designer. Fredi and Niels, they are there to support us as guest editors. So I just want to introduce the group a bit. So there's Leo, as I said, Leo Bettini Oberkalmsteiner. There's Tibor Bilitsky, Dominic Kim, and me. We have been collaborating on various projects rooted in art, architecture, and photography now for almost more than 10 years. And we basically started in university at TU München as co-editors of Planphase Architecture magazine. Now we all live and work in Zurich and in Basel. While working at Planphase, we met and collaborated with Max Creasy, who at Superposition is a part of the editorial board, and he specialized, of course, in everything that is concerning photography and visual art. He lives and works in Berlin and in London. Last but not least, there's, of course, Fredi Fischli and Niels Olson. Thank you also for joining tonight. They're both living and working in Zurich. Fredi, I think, is now currently living in Rome, half-half. They both studied art history, and since 6 years, Fredi and Niels co-curate the GTA exhibitions at ETH Zurich. And currently there's the exhibition Retail Apocalypse, which is simultaneous taking part at ETH and Harvard GSD. They are also regularly co-curating exhibitions at Luma, Schwarze Café in Zurich, and various other institutions.
You have to unmute. Of course. Does it work? Yeah, now. Perfect. So hi, everyone. I'm very proud and honored to have the pleasure to present you this Superposition. I hear myself twice. Is it maybe because, now, no, it's still, it's the first time I speak in front of a camera like that. So, and we're all in the same room, which is fantastic. And now it's working, perfect. Yeah, thank you very much. So usually, you know, when you write a book or write a text or a poetry or whatever is you bring to paper, you first express yourself, and the end you give it a title. And it was quite a struggle to find the title for our periodical, because it has to be a vessel where you put everything inside, where you put your ideas inside, your associations inside, your ideologies, and so on and so forth. And we came up with this term Superposition, which is a composed term. It starts with super, a word that is it's describing the extraordinary in a positive way, and position, which gives a connotation of emplacement at the same time in time, space, and also in an intellectual way. It's it has a strong idea. It has a strong idea of the youngest being on the top, of the youngest layer in geology, for example. Superposition is just simply means that the youngest layer is on the top of everything. As in architecture, it's the same in architectural grammar, as we see here in this fantastic example in Rome, where you have the capital on top. So the youngest basically expression stays on top. And also in literature, sometimes in the intellectual part of superposition, here in the Metamorphosis of Nietzsche, where he speaks about the metamorphosis of the spirit, starting from the camel over the lion, ending up to the child, has this concept of the youngest being on top, and at the same time of a new beginning. So the new beginning is in a way within the definition itself of superposition. The new beginning, for example, humanism led to a new beginning, the Renaissance. We believe very strongly in the concept of the kalos kaiagatos, in the concept of the beautiful and the good one at the same time, as the ancient Greeks used to say, where you have like, maybe not as far as Dostoevsky goes, that says that beauty will save the world, but still we are like very romantic about this concept of beauty and of function. We want to escape the inferno. We want to climb up the 9 rings of the inferno and escape this dark period we're living in. And probably one method to do this is through, as Karl Raimund Popper would call it, the word tree, through the books. Because the books open up new perspectives, they open up new concepts, they're vessels filled with knowledge. And the most important thing about them, they give us the ability to initiate a multilogue. We don't want to classify things. We don't want to put things into a box. We don't want to see things just black and white. We would like to think about many colors at the same time. We'd like to combine colors, because the combination of colors is beautiful. Sometimes it creates chaos, but we need chaos in order to generate a dancing star. We need to think out of the box in order to create something new, in order to think about elements of the surrounding and put them together into a new facade, put them together into a new artifact. Today we know that the juicy salif came from the moon. We don't know the designer of an object that we buy about 650 million times a year. And we probably think that this chair, since it has holes, belongs to the trash because you cannot use it anymore. But today we don't want to think like that. Today we would like to think in a polyvalent way. We would like to see things from a different perspective, from a different angle. Because this simple basket of fruits showing us juicy fruits and inviting us to eat it, if we look at it from a different perspective, it maybe appears to be an expression, appears to be something completely new, something completely different that we didn't think about. Something completely new that you wouldn't think about. The illustration of time where form changes, where form stays the same, but functionality changes. That's what we're interested about. We believe in ghosts. We believe that we see a chimney, a fireplace, which is actually not there, but still is the center of the house. And we do this because we like to combine different disciplines. We like to think about anatomy and functionality. We like to think about hydraulics and art at the same time. We like also to play with things. We like to have a playful approach on things, because through play you can learn a lot. And we like to dig deep into objects. We like to enter those objects. We like to see them from different angles and perspectives, especially if they become architecture. And we're interested in the approach, in the transition between reality and the model, or in this case, between the model and what becomes afterwards to be architecture or reality. We do not only believe in the multilog, we do not only believe in the word citizen, in the Weltbürger, but we do very strongly believe in the act of building bridges. Because on one hand, that's what humanity is about. And on the other hand, that's what creates a vibrant movement of friction. We also do like very much angry people. Sing or muse the anger of Achilles. That's how the Iliad begins. We like animals. We like domestic animals, and we like rational animals. We like people that are meant to be a little strange, a little weird, that live on the edge, that some would classify them as crazy, as probably we would classify ourselves as well. But it's exactly there at the border, at the edge of things where you create friction, and friction leads to fire. We're motivated by the will to collaborate and to share observations and impressions. There is, the dialogue is the mother of all collaboration. It can be a collaboration by dialogue itself, by talking, by asking the right questions and debating on different answers. It can be a dialogue effects and through impersonification of art itself. It can be fighting on the same ring for an ideal, for something you believe together in it. Or it can be like we are today, just talking within an infosphere, just collaborating within each other and within ourselves, listening to ourselves and sharing different opinions. We like to reach the highest point and to observe things without having any boundaries, without having any objects in front of us. We like to have a broad view, a broad horizon on things. But at the same time, we'd like to investigate into things into detail. We like to look at them multiple times in order to understand them. We like to take many frames of it, so that in the end, we eventually are able to understand the difference between a flying horse and a galloping one. Or eventually we are able to understand the difference between one horse and a herd of horses. We strongly believe in love. We believe in the act of love, and we believe in the expression of love. And we are aware of the consequences of love. We embrace them. We embrace the consequences of love with open arms. And even though it's sad to leave sometimes the past behind us, sometimes it's necessary. It's necessary, especially when we smell putrefaction. We have to follow our nose. We have to take our lantern and go out in the market and shout, "He's dead. The past is dead," because only then we can resurrect into a new and brighter future. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. Without going more or continuing what Leo said, I will quickly go into a more, let's say, rational way of describing where we come from. We roughly worked between 2010 and 2018, Leo, Elena, Dominic, and I, together with Clara Wellberg and David Wellberg, as well as Martin Wittmann and Christiane Müller, did a magazine in Munich that was connected to the Architecture Museum there and its director, Andres Lepik. And most notably, I think what people might know from bookshops is this trilogy of issues number 5, 6, and 7, where we try to bring together young uprising architects in well-established offices. We of course were inspired by a number of great magazines. I think if you look back into the time of magazine architecture magazines or magazines in general, you find a great number of great examples. if it's design or it's graphic design, it's content or the expression itself. But we took great interest in one particular architecture and design magazine that most of you, I guess, know, is Terrazzo magazine, that was mostly led by Barbara Radice and Ettore Satsas. And with its carefully chosen cover color schemes and linking art, design, architecture, photography, and the communication, they communicate the beauty of the architectural discipline at its best. And it has been not only a great inspiration for us in an indirect way, but also in a direct way. Since it's linking exactly these disciplines of art, architecture, design, photography, but also we took some of the columns that you find and tried to reinterpret some of these in our current interpretation. With Superposition, we try to bring together what Leo described before. The stratification of earth and rocks becomes the stratification of paper itself. The V-shape end of the magazine itself is kind of showing on the side this stratification. The magazine as an artifact invites you to rotate it, to engage with it, to touch it, to open it, and to put it into different directions. The two prime colors open up this realm of friction that Leo described. And with Hardcore Home, we first of all came to the idea, or we came to Hardcore Home first only with home, and this term home standing for a feeling and a place at the same time, which we found quite interesting. The term hardcore is rooted in a number of non-architectural contexts, and home could be interpreted as positioning an attitude or a counterpart to a currently soft architectural expression that you find. But at the same time, hardcore home could be seen as both, at one point, home in its purest form or its most radical articulation.
Thanks, Tibor. I just wanted to reflect on this article that I have worked on with Charlotte von Moos and Florian Salter, and about how as an article it works within the magazine and how it provides a space of possibility, rather more like a project space within the magazine. And it's what's created is a conversation between the people who are working on the magazine, rather than a monologue. It becomes a dialogue between the different people who are working on it. So if we skip to the next slide. So in the past, I've worked on several different magazines, and a lot of sort of what goes on is sort of self-promotion in terms of the articles that are written and produced, and there's editors who take over responsibility from the photographers and the writers, and then it becomes sort of squeezed together in a house style. And what Leo really pointed to before was this idea of a dialogue, a conversation between the different participants who are entering into our universe. And in this instance, the article came about because Charlotte had invited me to Miami to work on a book that she was producing or is producing about Architectonica's Babylon project. And so I was down there under that pretense, but then of course Florian and Charlotte showed me around, and the whole time that I was down there, I was just taking photographs on my own accord. So if you go to the next slide, Tibor. And so there was very much a nondescript kind of brief in terms of what I was doing. I was just taking photos of what Florian and Charlotte were showing me. And this became the basis of the dialogue between myself and Florian, who in turn sort of turned it over to Charlotte as well. So I sort of spent my spare time taking these photographs, and then later on turned them over to, or showed them to Florian, and then Florian continued that dialogue by extracting what he saw. And so what really this article represents is a space for practitioners to create something new rather than this monologue about their own practice. So if you skip to the next one. So many of the photos in this sort of come from their own backyard, or very sort of close observations to home. And it's through this like play of word and text that we're conversing in that we extrapolate this larger story that then turns into a story about Miami and what Miami represents. Next one. So for instance, we visited the Cuban restaurant on the side of the road, Versailles, and these, at the time, it was just a small kind of fleeting visit, but this, through my observation and then the discussion with Florian, it turned into a kind of a larger realization about what this represented in terms of roadside and what it represented in terms of Miami vernacular. So this became the basis of the conversation. Okay, sorry, next. Okay, yep.
So what you, now we're jumping kind of from Miami to Fukuoka in Japan, and now I will explain a bit about a column that we call the plans, which is a recurring column in the Superposition in the magazine. And with the lockdown and kind of the prison at home, and also with the fear of capacity overload of hospitals, we kind of started thinking about other typologies that we normally don't really think about too much, because nowadays they're like mainly exiled into the outskirts of the cities, which are the heterotopias, or as Foucault calls it, or puts it, the worlds within worlds. And so one of this kind of heterotopia would be the hotel, which we classified as the voluntary home, kind of. So here seeing the Aldo Rossi, very iconic hotel, Il Palazzo, or some other examples by Heyduk. Last one. Are you clicking? Oh yeah, next. Next. And here this very beautiful drawing of a hotel also. And then some other typology or kind of heterotopia, which would be the hospital, the more than a voluntary home, a recommended home, where trying to recover. And then if you go next, here the very classical symmetric plan of a hospital. If you go next, also. Then we kind of ended up with the most radical of the heterotopias, which is the prison. Here you can see kind of a cell. And if you go further, and then ending kind of with we found the most interesting and most radical plan, which shows the ground floor of a prison, which is in itself like a extremely beautiful plan, but it shows a prison in Paris from the 19th century, and yeah, this is kind of. Now we're leading to the home stories, Fredi and Niels. If you want to jump in.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, thank you for the invitation. I'm super happy that we can be part of this first magazine as guest editors. Really as friends, and you invited us quite early to discuss the magazine, and now it's funny to see how it turned out, and also how you now interpret the title of it, Superposition and the Hardcore Home, because I remember that back then when we discussed, we said, well, if you do a new magazine today, in a way you have to be very unique. You don't need to cover the general discourse anymore. You need to be very unique, and I guess this maybe turned you in this way of superposition. But we also came up with hardcore. I remember that night because we were talking about the hard Mac by the artist Dan Mitchell, and kind of the directness of this magazine as a role model. But then on the other hand, we also thought, well, of course, it's kind of the obvious way to think, like to be unique, but maybe like home, or the idea of schöne Wohnen, or the most general way of approaching a magazine, like an archetype, could also be an interesting entry point. And it's nice to now see this kind of ambivalence in the magazine.
Yeah, and then at this point we also talked about possible themes, and I guess, yeah, the magazine, as Fredi said, is really in this kind of ambiguity position. On the one hand, you aim for architecture criticism, but on the other hand, it also speaks of desire, or to a certain extent, you can't also escape a certain drive of consumption it refers to. So therefore, we thought home is really on the kind of a direct theme, which could go back to kind of the most classic consumer-driven periodical, like Architectural Digest, for instance. But at the same time, it's quite a heavy topic, which of course, home isn't just a nice comfort feeling, it also has a dark side. So we thought it's in a way a really good start, which immediately goes in both directions.
And like even now, of course, yeah, we were talking about this theme of the home way before the pandemic. And now, of course, the theme got much more drastic and also much more clearer in its form of privilege, if we talk about the home. But nevertheless, it is interesting to look at this as a place, as a conflict zone, as a place of privilege, as a place important for discourses for feminism, in art, in architecture, but also always keeping in mind, like a little bit like before we were looking at this plan of the prison, of not like the fetishization of a plan of a prison, and also not the fetishization of the home. And there our entry point was an essay by Catherine Malabou, where she writes about life and prison. And she starts with the idea that famously Roland Barthes said that actually language is already a prison, because it's fascism, it's how he says, because it forces you to choose between if you use a feminist pronoun or a masculine one. And then she goes on, like all these ideas of the imprisonment in thinking, until she kind of realizes, well, but prison, it's something really different if you talk about Black Death and the history of Black Death. And if you're coming out of a history of enslavement, can you then talk about the prison in thinking or in language. And I see there an interesting relation to the home. And this was a little bit the way we would approach it.
And one of kind of the first article we brought in, or we proposed to the whole team, editor team, was by Reba Maybury, actually a British artist, author, and she calls herself a political dominatrix. And she wrote the text just for this first issue, and it basically describes a situation where she visits a SOP in his apartment, and then she, at the beginning, she was alone waiting for the submissive to enter the apartment. She was alone in his place, and she observed this mason jar which was on the couch table. And then she kind of reflects over a longer period in the essay what it means that this cute housewife product suddenly invades gentrified bars all over Brooklyn, and what this means. And then later on she looks at the library, which is full of Charles Bukowski books, and then she reflects what would it mean to have Bukowski books in your library? Is it a signifier that you're culturally open, that you're claiming to be avant-garde, for instance? And I think this is really a crucial understanding, because it shows from the start that each design object, each piece of architecture is really culturally and also socially codified.
And also it was interesting for us because it's as like a dominatrix. There's no sex going on, but the sex, like the hardcore, is purely within architecture. It's about all these artifacts, and his longing for a wish that you will discover in the text that she fulfills kind of through the setting of this interior. So there we really discovered this hardcore home to go on. But then we thought, well, maybe that's an interesting starting point to do home stories out of just like a very also personal interest of homes we would actually like to see and learn more about. So maybe if you show some slides. Yeah, like for example, this one that was from Aldo van Eyck that studied architecture at the ETH. And when he finished his studies, this was his very first commission that he got to do. And of course, he was eager. He wanted to be an architect and really build. But then he only got this home, this interior. So what he did was, instead of like decorating it and just selecting the right furniture for schöner Wohnen, he created like really an inserted architecture by shifting the whole space just slightly for like 5 degrees or something to get it out of angle of this like tricky tower room, and kind of to destroy also this romanticization of the tower room. He would mirror the one wall he built in to the top of the ceiling to actually cover the tower of the room and create kind of a space within the space.
This is a house by Theo Hotz, which is kind of in a bourgeois area above the city of Zurich. And a while ago, we were doing a research of the kind of the generation before the Swiss golden generation, before Herzog Dömer, Roger Diener, etc. We looked at the generation which is much less known, and one of our kind of most favorite ones was Theo Hotz, who you might know with this huge aluminium building that you when you enter Zurich that you see to the right hand side from the Autobahn, which almost looks like a Pompidou. And this is a rather unknown villa project above Zurich. And I think Tibor and Elena had the chance to visit in person and take pictures for the magazine.
Oh, here you have the plans of Heimo Zobernick. So like Reba Maybury and him, we involved a lot of artists. And Heimo Zobernick you know quite well. As Elena said in the introduction, we are doing this exhibition space called Schwarzes Café, which is an actual architecture by the artist. And he, I mean, it's always hard to characterize in one sentence what someone is working on, but like one of his entry points to architecture is that he really works with where modernism arrived today, with kind of the flattened out modernism that he kind of in an affirmative but nevertheless critical way embraces. So here, for example, we have the plans of his studios that he built, where he used these shelves, a little bit like Erex, but like the ones that traditionally are produced in Vienna, to create an interior throughout these two corridors of shelvings that separate the room, the space to create rooms. But at the same time, it's also like really reminiscence of, I would say, like Chott and how to insert minimalism in a space, but in a kind of contemporary, flattened out moment of modernism now.
And this is another project by Bernd Knies, who is the former partner of Arno Brandelhuber. And it's also an artist home outside Munich in a forest area. And the whole building is made with, Tibor, what's the name again of the material? I keep for Perspex.
Polycarbonate.
Polycarbonate. So the whole, even the roof is like the whole facade, including the roof, is made with polycarbonate. So basically in the evening, if there's light inside, the whole house begins to operate like a screen. And also the painting of the artist who lives there and commissioned the house, Markus Oehlen, his whole work kind of deals with how the television screen basically entered the media of painting. So it's kind of an interesting response, I guess, by Knies to the practice of the artist who lives in the house.
And here you see a slide from the contribution by Luigi Alberto Cipini that has a young artist practice in Milan called Armatur Global. And his contribution is a little bit like a meta reading on the home stories. Because when we look at the home stories, like the one from before, from the artist Markus Oehlen, we also, of course, always like try to figure out who is this person that is living there. What is the taste? Like easily we try to judge. And of course, this is nothing that is done out of naivety from the author, but the home is very much often a place of display, even more if you're open and willing to take pictures of your home for a magazine and distribute it. And Luigi is writing this text about how he's kind of confused with this problem, and that's why he can have like no furniture, and he just has this old workout machines that he bought at one time together with his girlfriend. But then since they ordered it online, they had like the American adapters and the power system never worked. So now they're just standing in the home as these strange sculptures. And at the same time, also this kind of looking for neglecting any giving away of style or telling. He wanted to paint the whole apartment all in gray, but like these muscle machines. The adventure failed, and it came out in this like really strange greenish tone. And so he writes about how people try to like present this display of themselves and are like in this struggle or even failure, as in his own example.
Oh, and this is actually another work from a group show we organized a few years ago, which was titled Home, and it's by a British artist called Georgie Nettell. And she and the work is quite direct, but also quite brutal. She basically asks artists, friends, parents to send pictures of their living rooms. So it's really a kind of a direct piece about class structures among the art world.
So you see how much it is like also embedded within British culture, that I also experienced this whenever you are visiting London or something. It's always the question, where are you living, in which neighborhood, but also the idea of covering up the heritage, and you never know, like amongst the artist students, who is coming from where, and you come up with like this new display as Luigi describes it, but then going back to the parents' homes, you kind of discovered in her embarrassingly open collection the privileged backgrounds that she and her friends are coming from. And for the exhibition, we also had to contribute, so you will also find our parents' homes in this work.
So I guess the home stories, they really shift between kind of the embracing of the home, but also revealing its dark side. So we're really curious how the Superposition team will continue to which kind of next hardcore subject.
Yeah, thank you very much for this great introduction. And we obviously hope that we kind of fed the audience with some hints and some interesting points of view and some interesting content. And I think this is the point for the last approximately 20 minutes to start a little discussion, to start a little interaction within ourselves that are sharing. I see 26 people. This brief presentation of Superposition, and yeah, whoever would like to take the word is welcome to do so, and we can't wait to listen to your comments and to share our answers and questions and opinions.
I just see Inge and Jan on the screen, because I tried to read just before the 3 articles on the 3 changed houses. I would be really curious to hear about the project.
You're unmuted by the host. Hi to everyone.
Hello.
Are we online now or?
Yes, we hear you.
First of all, we haven't seen only the PDF format of the Superpositions, and it's very exciting, and it was very exciting working with you all together. And now we are very curious to see the real content, as we just saw the extracts of our contribution into that. So it's an exciting moment also to reveal that you revealed to us tonight all the other things that are hovering around in the Superposition book. So we're looking forward to receive it any moment in our mailbox. One of those days, I guess, or weeks, I can also be happy with that idea. But now, Niels, I understood you're pointing to the 3 little contributions we brought to the magazine, and which are a little bit sprawled around. And then I think you're particularly pointing to a little house. It's in fact maybe the only project we really show off in the magazine, which is a house called Berau, for an artist we made how many years ago? 10, 15 years, 10, more than 10 years ago, I believe it is. And which is, yes, a house we refurbished. So let's say it's a connection of 2 smaller houses we brought to one house for an artist who really wanted to make that house with us, and that's very particular desires into the house we had to deal with, and it was based partly on do-it-yourself, making a house, a home with strange objects in it. And then for no money. And then at the end of the story, when the house was delivered, she didn't want to live in it, and she sold it immediately. But on the other hand, it was an interesting experience to be making a house together, not as an architect, but together with an artist, and reflecting constantly the different ways to live the house. And particularly why she didn't want to stay there was not especially because of the house, because of the fact that she felt strange radiation in the air. So it was a total other reason why she abandoned the house, like in immediate terms, but it was a kind of radiation she captioned, and she was all in this kind of things. But on the other hand, the house to us at that moment brought together what, let's say, an architecture practice could be confronted with the questions in not only making a house waterproof, but making a house a place to live, how to cook and how to bath, and how to try to get that done with the almost nothing available, by which then the house became a completely collection of recuperation of materials we could find along streets we could buy for no money at second-hand market. The client also came one day arriving with a sink bathtub, which was in fact meant to be outside, but how to integrate it inside and to create an interior. I think to us, the project is maybe in fact not too much about the walls and the roof of the house, which in fact, okay, physically define your house, but merely about the interior of the house at that point. And how that house was part of, let's say, kind of small city neighborhood of small alleys, a kind of 19th century city development of labor houses, and how this house also was situated in a neighborhood which is known in Ghent to be the rival neighborhood of the city. And it combined, I think, that in two extremes, how to live in that particularly very much under stress neighborhood, and on the other hand, how to arrive with something which has to do with the interior of life, how to live that house. And that's why we brought it, we proposed it to Superposition to bring it into the magazine as a second article, I believe, the second contribution, or the first contribution of the series of the three houses. And then the second project we brought into the magazine is the house we actually are here right now. It's the house we live here ourselves in the city of Kent, in which we, in that sense now, Niels, I think I probably mentioned the wrong house, which is also in the book, but the second project, the second article, second contribution is about this house we live here right now into the city. And why did we brought it into the magazine is because actually I think it's known now by everyone, we changed the constitution of the office since 2 years. And by that it happened that the new office, or let's say the small office that Inge and I re-established, arrived back home on the place we lived. So until COVID came around, everyone was here also part, let's say, of the scenery of the house. We have the office here in front of the house, which is today only occupied by Inge and me. And we have a kind of, let's say, remote office to respect all the regulations on health and safety today. In the building we built 12 years ago, Les Balais et de la Baie, maybe you might know that project, which is now empty because theater people have no work at all, and so now we squatted the space. So I mean, why we brought that second contribution is because at first, in the first article, we wanted to reflect on, I would not say why we changed the constitution of the office, because there are many other reasons, but on the other hand, it came a moment of reflection, and this Beraal house, as I described it for the artist, was for us, one of the key works in which we felt like something, I would not say we like to return to, but I would say we like to bring back to the front in our way of approach of things. And then second contribution in the magazine is then exactly the plot we are here right now, where we live and where we work partly. And the idea also on how we folded back the practice into a smaller scale, into a smaller perspective, and how that at first, impossible those days, but at first interfered, let's say, with a kind like of family life, which was around. I would not exaggerate that, but actually it gives us, sorry, there are a lot of bees here around us. It gives a kind of like new reflection on where eventually let's say the concerns in architecture could be redefined for us at a certain point.
But yeah, I think we bring those two projects together also because it's really about living and how you could rethink living. It's I think this reflection that we have in both projects. The other one is a very small one, but the way you move in the house makes that the house becomes very large, and that's the same what we have here in our house. You have to go out to go in another part of the house, and which makes that the house becomes very different in the way if you look around to normal houses, but also like in the sense of the sensation you have of the house. So you can enlarge the house by the way you are dealing with it. And I think with a small house, it's very clear also in the facade there you have also like the staircase, and the way you move in that house is for me very similar with our own house, which is a bigger one, not that big, but which is a bigger one, of course. And then we have a third one also.
Yes, before we go to the third contribution, as far as this is a question, Niels, but maybe what is of course nice as you presented now, the how you call it, your presentation, the home, I forgot the title of your contribution. Home stories, is that it's true, and also I connected to the idea of the prison and where we are now in those times we live, is that in a very nice way, somehow, not everything, but somehow of the topics that comes back closer to us when it comes about hovering over the architectural field is of course the way we live the houses and how we have been confronted with that in the last months, being locked down at home, not getting out and such. So I don't know what happened in our professional life of changing office and all those kinds of things together for many other reasons also. At the end, this confinement we experienced last months brought us also back in architectural thinking towards a kind of, let's say, essential needs, essential functionalities, essential emotionalities that goes along with how we organize our lives. And in that sense, I think both projects, although I think we decided on them before the whole COVID really bursted out, but those two projects has to do with that kind of smallest way of bringing things together and how to, I would not say organize life, but to give life a certain chance on a different perspective, whatever happens. I think at least this was not, let's say, the conscious goal or ambition with those two projects, but on the other hand, we discovered or rediscovered a lot of ways of how life can be when one eventually talks about architecture. And the third contribution is again, also in COVID times, we amused ourselves very much with drawings in Excel realm as a kind of boredom, we called it. But this boredom led to, let's say, also a way of redrawing architecture work we had been making in the past. And then at the end, it leads now to what will be released soon, a new, let's say, interactive digital platform you will be able to visit within a month, something like this, in which we try to reflect in another way on the things we have been doing so far, or at least represent them in a different way. So that are the three contributions.
Even on the drawings, we will come back probably.
Yeah.
Isn't it, Alice?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting point. About the presence of digital media. Could I just ask, how do you, in terms of conceiving a new magazine in the context of so much of our information being now sourced through digital media, how does that context transform one's thinking about a magazine?
Maybe I think like you get asked a lot, why do you do a magazine, since you have so many possibilities of doing stuff online? And I think the perception of a magazine changed a little bit. I guess maybe that's yeah, I guess a little bit from giving you information, or there were a lot of magazines that gave you information, I think, about what's happening around the world in architecture. That was the main idea of having a magazine in architecture. However, in these times, I think social media formats as this 100 Day Studio or blogs and websites do this job even better, because you can live stream and experience live these changes in architecture. So the question is, why, or what should a magazine do? And I think it would be too easy to say to curate content, but it's I think you have the chance to really go into detail, of course, through different terms of media, but also I think in our particular case, what interested us the most, and that's also why Hardcore Home was such a very good theme, was actually the narrative in all these aspects. So you meet with people like Jan or rger, and you suddenly, if they're architects or not, everybody has a story to tell about home, and everybody experiences home in a different way. And I think that's the interesting thing about this the whole issue, is that you have so many narratives opening up this realm of home. But on the other hand, the classical idea of a magazine, like giving information or going deep going deeper into the theme of presenting a certain type of home, or giving you the opportunity to really go into detail, that's, I think, where we move ourselves. I mean, the narrative on the one side, and the other things like a classical architecture magazine. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
absolutely, thank you. Do we have any more questions? Because otherwise we're going close to the end. Or sorry, did someone else want to respond to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the magazine, as well as you were asking, as a printed media, you know, it's very important to us, because it becomes an object, you know, it becomes an artifact that lays around. It has a sort of contingency within a space, you know, it opens up relationships within a space. You see it like laying underneath something or on top of something, and it basically creates a friction with the elements that it has around. You have it maybe half open, you use it on your desk, or you have it, you read it while you're in the toilet, you know. It basically also travels around, you know. It's a physical object through space that has a certain position there, and it has a certain position in time as well. So it has to be specific about, not about the content. It's to have content that is not directly linked to time, that is contemporary but doesn't have an expiring date. But at the same time, the object itself, it defines a certain period, a certain age, and a certain way of thinking. Probably, as we define ourselves, young thinkers, you know. And that's the beauty about it, you know, to have this moment of of contingency, of chaos, of Zufall, yeah, which of coincidence, exactly, yeah.
That would add, like, there's really a longing for physical objects, especially these days. It's like when the Terrazzo magazines you showed in the beginning, and you order one of these from the rare books, and it arrives as a vintage copy in your mailbox, and you go down and you hold it in your hand. It has, like, since the magazine is so dead, it has this new fascination that it's almost arriving from another planet. And we also discovered this, that we were now thinking, oh no, what can we do as exhibitions at the architecture school now this fall, because it's even more closed than any museum. Since it's a school, it's even more fragile, that you have to watch out with visitors and social distancing. So we thought something like the magazine, like drawings, could be interesting, because you can just take a picture or scan it or put it in a mail and send it to us, and then we could distribute it digitally, how you say. But then so many people react positively to the idea that we could also just print them out and make posters, put them into a mail and send it to your home, and you can have your exhibition at home. So you could have the magazine, the exhibition, it adds something to your home.